Adam Schiff built his career telling America a story. He knew it was false. For 6 years, he repeated it to every camera. He never expected John Kennedy to walk onto the Senate floor. He never expected him to open a single folder. He never expected him to dismantle his legacy in 40 minutes. Schiff attacked his colleagues on the Senate floor. He felt secure. He never expected Kennedy to stand up. He never expected him to dismantle his public narrative. Kennedy brought a single folder of receipts. Schiff asserted he possessed direct proof of secret foreign coordination. 53 sworn witnesses testified to the contrary. Kennedy had reviewed every single transcript. He carried them onto the Senate floor. They were tucked within a thick folder. It was designated as his receipts. Schiff was delivering remarks concerning the state of democracy. He did this frequently. He did it several times a week. He delivered these speeches from the Senate floor. He gave them during committee sessions. He spoke on podcasts. He appeared on cable news outlets. They requested his appearance with the regularity of a recurring television character. The speech was predictable. He spoke of democracy facing severe threats. He spoke of vital institutions collapsing. He spoke of the sanctity of truth. He spoke of the obligation of public officials. They had to defend the Republic. They had to protect it from those who seek to undermine it. It was a polished speech. It was practiced. It appears moving initially. It feels performative by the 10th iteration. Today marked roughly the 400th instance. Yet today, Schiff veered from his prepared script. He stopped addressing the chamber about abstract threats. He turned to his right. He looked straight at the senior senator from Louisiana. He committed a fatal error. It would require 40 minutes to unravel. He stated, "My colleague from Louisiana opposed certifying a democratic election. He has dedicated more time to defending a twice formally challenged president than to upholding the Constitution. He swore to defend it. Now he holds a seat on the Intelligence Committee. He presumes to lecture this body regarding integrity." Schiff's voice resonated with assurance. He had repeated these assertions for so long. He had mistaken his own repetition for proof. He continued, "Senator Kennedy, with all due respect, you do not get to sit on the Intelligence Committee. You do not get to act as though the evidence is non-existent. You do not get to dismiss it simply because it is inconvenient for your political party. The evidence." He articulated the word in his practiced manner. He spoke casually. He spoke with authority. He acted as though this evidence were a tangible object. He acted as if everyone in the room had observed it. He spoke as if it were a document resting on a shelf. It was a fact so established that questioning it constituted bad faith. He had proclaimed it on Meet the Press. He had declared it on CNN. He declared it on MSNBC. He stated it on podcasts. He repeated it in committee hearings. He said it at press conferences. He wrote it in fundraising emails. He used it during the remarks of 2 congressional trials. He had uttered the word evidence 247 times on national television. This happened over 4 years. Each time, he spoke it with conviction. He believed repeating a statement sufficiently could transform it into reality. Across the chamber, John Kennedy slowly removed his reading glasses. They were the inexpensive drugstore variety. They cost $12.99. He regarded Schiff with a calm expression. He looked like a man who just received what he had been seeking. He stood up. He moved slowly. The way Kennedy stood was a form of nonverbal communication. It was unhurried. It was deliberate. It was the pace of a man with nowhere else to be. He had no reason to rush. What he intended to say would require exactly as much time as necessary. It would take not a single moment less. He walked straight to the Senate microphone. He placed a folder on the wooden podium. The folder was thick. It was heavily tabbed. The tabs were labeled in his own handwriting. They were marked with specific dates. They were marked with specific names. These were not yet visible to the television cameras. On the front of the folder, Kennedy had written two simple words in black marker, "Receipts." "Well," Senator Kennedy began. His voice was steady. "I am pleased you mentioned the evidence. I have been searching for it for 6 long years. I brought some receipts." The Republican side of the chamber became still. The Democratic side was not still. They exhibited an uncomfortable shifting. It is the shifting that occurs when a political caucus realizes a member has opened a dangerous door. That door ought to have remained shut. Schiff had declared the word evidence 247 times on national television. In the ensuing 40 minutes, Kennedy would ask him one question. "Where is it?" He asked it exactly 11 times. Schiff would not offer a single response, not even once. "Let me begin at the starting point," Kennedy stated. "This narrative has a distinct beginning. That beginning matters." He opened the heavy folder to the first tab. He did not rush. Rushing was not in his character. It was not in his interest. Every second of his unhurried reading forced the chamber to wait. That waiting generated tension. That tension was the environment where his measured delivery achieved its devastating effect. March 22, 2017, Kennedy read aloud. "My colleague from California appeared on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. Mr. Todd asked him a direct question. He asked if the evidence of unverified foreign coordination was purely circumstantial. My colleague responded." Kennedy paused. He looked down. "I am reading directly from the official transcript. Precision is important here." Quote, "No, I do not wish to enter into specifics, but I will state that there is evidence that is not circumstantial, and it is very much worthy of investigation." End quote. Kennedy looked up. "Evidence that is not circumstantial. Those are my colleague's exact words. Not my words, not a Republican's words, not a cable news host's words. His exact words, placed on the record to Chuck Todd. Now, my colleague was not any random congressman making this assertion. He was the ranking member. He was subsequently the chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. He possessed high-level access to classified information. Most Americans could never view it. Most members of Congress could never view it. Most investigative journalists could never verify it. The chairman of the Intelligence Committee goes on national television. He states he has personally observed evidence of secret coordination. He says it is not circumstantial evidence. He says it is direct evidence. People believe him. They believe him because they trust the institution he represents. They believe him because they assume a man with his clearance level would not make that assertion unless it were true. Kennedy removed his glasses again. He held them in one hand. America believed him. Because America believed him, America dedicated 4 years and $32 million in taxpayer funds to a special counsel investigation. We endured thousands of hours of congressional hearings. Careers were investigated. Careers were ruined. Families were fractured. A nation was divided in a painful manner. Some individuals say they have never recovered from it. I speak with regular people back home in Louisiana. They say they have not recovered. My colleague informed America there was a secret hidden in the lake. America drained that lake for 4 years. They utilized every investigative resource they possessed. He paused. He let the silence hang in the air. We finally drained the lake. The first special counsel concluded his investigation. The second special counsel concluded his investigation. 53 sworn witnesses testified under penalty of perjury before my colleague's own committee. There was nothing in the lake. The lake was empty. My question is straightforward. Where is the evidence, Senator? Schiff did not respond immediately. When he finally did, He responded as he always had. He spoke with the rapid fluency of a trained attorney. He had rehearsed this defense countless times. It had become automatic. It was a bodily reflex, rather than an argument. The special counsel report documented extensive contacts between the campaign and foreign operatives, Schiff stated quickly. The campaign chairman was meeting with a foreign intelligence officer. He shared internal polling data. The campaign welcomed outside interference. The candidate's own son accepted a meeting at a major tower with foreign nationals. They promised damaging opposition information. Those are established facts. They are documented in the special counsel report. That constitutes evidence, Senator. It may not have escalated to the strict legal level of unlawful backroom coordination beyond a reasonable doubt, but it is clear evidence of precisely what I stated. Secret coordination. It was a strong, practiced response. Schiff was at his best when reciting specific facts the report had documented. Those facts were real. The contacts were real. The tower meeting was real. The sharing of the polling data was real. His answers sounded comprehensive. It sounded authoritative. It sounded final. Kennedy waited for him to finish speaking. He waited the way a patient fisherman waits for a hooked fish to stop running. Then, he calmly begins to reel it back in. Senator, I appreciate you citing the special counsel report, Kennedy replied smoothly. You cite it selectively, but you do cite it. Let me cite the same report, the same document. Page 2 of Volume 1. I am going to read this exactly as it appears on the page. The exact words matter far more than anyone's personal interpretation. Quote, the investigation did not establish that members of the campaign unlawfully coordinated with the foreign government in its election interference activities. End quote. Kennedy looked back up. He locked eyes with Schiff. That is not John Kennedy of Louisiana saying that. That is the special counsel himself. The man you championed. The man you claimed would vindicate your television assertions. The man who spent 2 years employing 19 lawyers. He issued 2,800 subpoenas. He executed 500 search warrants. He interviewed approximately 500 witnesses. His final conclusion was, did not establish. Senator, not mine. Now, you just informed this chamber that mere contacts constitute evidence. Senator, let me assist you with that concept. We might have a fundamental vocabulary issue here. I call my barber in Madisonville. I tell him I need a haircut on Saturday. That is a contact. My barber subsequently purchases a new pair of scissors. That is a contact that precedes a specific action. It does not mean my barber and I secretly coordinated to rob the First National Bank of Washington Parish. Contacts are contacts. Unlawful coordination is unlawful coordination. They are different words. They describe different things. Kennedy's voice remained even. It was penetrating. You spent 4 years on national television telling the American people that mere contacts were proof of an unlawful conspiracy. The special counsel spent 2 years investigating those same contacts. He concluded they were not. The subsequent oversight investigation went further. It concluded the entire investigation was based on raw, unanalyzed, uncorroborated intelligence. It never should have been opened as a full investigation in the first place. Senator, we had 2 special counsels. We had 53 sworn witnesses. We spent $32 million. We spent 4 years utilizing the combined investigative resources of federal agencies, intelligence networks, and the House Intelligence Committee under your direct leadership. The final result was did not establish. So, I am going to ask you again. You deserve a fair chance to answer. The American people deserve to hear the true answer. Where is the more than circumstantial evidence you told Chuck Todd you possessed? Not casual contacts. Not brief meetings. Not a campaign manager's dinner conversation. The direct evidence. The evidence that is not circumstantial. The evidence that justified 4 years of national investigations and $32 million of the taxpayers' money. Where is it? Senator, the legislative chamber was quiet. It was not the quiet of unified agreement. Senators on both sides held strong, entrenched opinions about foreign actors, previous presidents, and Schiff himself. It was the heavy quiet of a direct question demanding a specific answer. It was a collective recognition that no specific answer had been given in 6 years. The glaring absence of an answer was rapidly becoming the permanent answer itself. Kennedy slowly turned to the second tab in his folder. The tab was labeled 53. This was the exact number of witnesses interviewed by the House Intelligence Committee during its probe. He handled the printed pages the way a seasoned trial lawyer handles crucial evidence during a closing argument. He moved deliberately. The physical, visual act of turning pages carries profound credibility. Reading directly from official documents carries weight. Extemporaneous political speech simply does not possess this. Senator, your committee conducted exactly 53 interviews during its major investigation. 53, Kennedy emphasized. You proudly chaired this committee. You possessed massive subpoena power. You had access to the nation's most classified intelligence. You questioned directors, attorneys general, deputy attorneys general, federal law enforcement officials, intelligence analysts, campaign operatives, and high-level political appointees from both major parties. You possessed more raw investigative authority than almost any committee chairman in modern congressional history. This is a documented fact. It is not a polite compliment. Those intense interviews were finally completed. The official testimony was transcribed and classified. You intentionally blocked their public release for 3 years. Kennedy leaned forward slightly. I have thought a lot about this, Senator. I have tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. Lord knows I have tried. If I possessed verified transcripts that proved the biggest political scandal since Watergate, I would release them immediately. That was what you were claiming on national television. I would release them that very afternoon. I would hold a massive press conference right on the Capitol steps. I would say, here is the proof. Read it for yourselves. Judge it with your own 2 eyes. That is what an honest man does. With solid evidence that proves his case, you did the exact opposite, Kennedy stated firmly. You classified the transcripts. You locked them securely in a dark vault that you controlled. They sat hidden in that vault. They were unseen by the voting public. They were unseen by your elected colleagues. They were unseen by the eager journalists who were repeating your daily claims. You went straight on national television. You continuously said the evidence existed. You said it on CNN. You said it on MSNBC. You said it on ABC. You said it on PBS. You said it loudly in committee hearings that were televised. You said it confidently in interviews that were transcribed. You said it repeatedly. The transcripts that contradicted you sat silently in a locked vault with your name right on the lock. It took the acting director of national intelligence to force your hand in 2020. He directly told you, release the transcripts, or I will release them for you. They were finally declassified. The American people could finally read what the witnesses had said under the strict penalty of perjury in your own committee room. The transcripts said something very different from what you had been constantly saying on television. Kennedy opened the folder to a marked page. James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence who served for 7 years. The man who oversaw 16 intelligence agencies. He testified under oath before your own committee. Here is what he said. I am reading this verbatim. Quote, I never saw any direct empirical evidence that the campaign or anyone in it was plotting or secretly coordinating with foreign actors to meddle with the election. End quote. Under oath, Senator. Not casually on a podcast. Not hidden in a fundraising email. Under oath. Sally Yates. The former Deputy Attorney General, appointed by a Democratic president and confirmed by a Democratic Senate. She testified under oath to the exact same conclusion. Andrew McCabe, the former Deputy Director of Federal Law Enforcement, the man who opened the initial investigation. He testified clearly that the investigation was based on raw intelligence that had never been fully corroborated. Then there is Evelyn Farkas. Kennedy continued. Miss Farkas is particularly interesting here. She went proudly on MSNBC in March of 2017. This was the exact same week, Senator, that you were telling Chuck Todd about your more than circumstantial evidence. She said loudly on national television that she had urged former administration officials to gather as much intelligence as possible before leaving office. It sounded like a high-level insider publicly confirming everything you were saying. It sounded like the ultimate smoking gun. Later, she sat right in front of your own committee, inside your own hearing room. She testified under oath that she had no first-hand knowledge, none whatsoever. She told the television cameras one dramatic thing. She told the sworn committee another. The cameras got the dramatic, fictional version. The committee got the actual truth. Kennedy set the printed page down carefully. He looked directly at Schiff. Senator, you possessed all of this critical testimony. Every single word of it. You read it. You classified it. You locked it tightly in a vault. Then, on the exact same week, sometimes on the exact same day, you went directly on CNN and MSNBC. You boldly told the American people the exact opposite of what your own witnesses had just told you under oath. Where I come from, we have a specific word for that. I keep saying that phrase because it is the only real place I know. When a grown man tells one thing to the official court and a different thing to the television cameras, we have a name for it. His tone shifted. It became more personal but no less sharp. My mama was a gentle woman. She was a devoted Sunday school teacher. She never said a harsh word about anyone in her entire life. She would have politely called it making a false claim to the public. She took the commandments seriously. My daddy was not a Sunday school teacher. He was a hard-working man with strong opinions. He was never shy about sharing them. He would have used a much shorter, blunter word. Whatever specific word you choose to use, Senator, the core meaning remains the same. You told the American people something your own witnesses could not confirm. You did this under your own oath, inside your own committee. You fully knew it. You personally read the transcripts. You deliberately locked them up. Where is the evidence, Senator? Kennedy smoothly turned to the third tab. His vocal delivery did not change. He maintained the measured Louisiana drawl. He kept the precise pace. He held the steady tone of a man simply reading an undeniable record. He was not passionately making a subjective argument. The actual content rapidly moved from the distant past directly to January 2025. The close proximity made the impact significantly sharper. Senator, I want to talk about something more recent. Something that happened just this year. I think it tells us something vital about my colleague. 6 long years of massive investigations do not reveal this. My colleague served on a publicized select committee. That specific committee conducted a massive investigation. It held prime-time public hearings. It produced a massive final report. It made severe legal referrals. You can agree or vehemently disagree with its final conclusions. I certainly have my own opinions. The work was officially done. Fair enough. On January 20th, 2025, the outgoing president issued broad preemptive pardons. This was the final day of the outgoing presidency. Mere hours remained before the official transition of power. He issued these pardons to the members of that specific committee. This directly included my colleague from California. Kennedy picked up another document. I want to read something specific that my colleague publicly said. He said it right before those pardons were officially issued. He said it clearly on CNN. I have the official transcript right here. I collect my colleague's transcripts the exact same way some people passionately collect baseball cards. I have quite a massive collection by now. A brief, quiet ripple of laughter echoed from the Republican side of the aisle. He said, quote, "It would be the wrong precedent to set. I do not want to see each president hereafter, on their way out the door, giving a broad category of pardons to members of their administration." End quote. Those are his exact words, placed on the record to Jake Tapper. He said it would be wrong. He said it was damaging for democracy. He said he did not want future presidents doing it. Then, he gladly accepted one himself. Kennedy locked eyes with Schiff again. Senator, where I come from, words are supposed to mean something. If a man says something is wrong on Monday and does that same thing on Tuesday, we call that a flip-flop. If he says it is wrong, but does it anyway because he fears the consequences. In poker, that is a tell. In politics, that is fear. Accepting a preemptive pardon right after saying preemptive pardons are wrong is a tell. Senator, it tells us clearly that my colleague was worried. The specific question this entire legislative body should be asking is what exactly was he so worried about? Truly innocent people do not need preemptive pardons. People who strictly follow the law do not need preemptive pardons. People who have nothing to hide do not need them. People who conducted their official investigation properly do not need them. People who handled classified intelligence appropriately do not need them. People who did not improperly alter official documents, direct illegal leaks, or intentionally mislead the voting public do not need a presidential pardon on the final day of an administration. They need nothing at all. The pardon loudly tells us, my colleague believed he might need serious protection from legal scrutiny. The only logical reason to need protection from scrutiny is if there is something hidden there. That hidden thing would not survive scrutiny. Where is the integrity, Senator? I have been actively looking for the evidence. I have been actively looking for the integrity. So far, I am currently 0 for 2. Kennedy repeated his summary with rhythmic precision. The first special counsel concluded his investigation. The Oversight Council concluded his investigation. 53 sworn witnesses testified under oath before my colleague's own committee. There was no secret in the lake. There was nothing in the lake. The lake was empty. My question remains straightforward. Where is the evidence, Senator? Again, Schiff did not respond immediately. When he did, he resorted to the same rehearsed loop. He fell back on the precise fluency of his Harvard training. He repeated the identical defense like an automated recording. He recited the documented contacts. He mentioned the polling data. He mentioned the tower meeting. He stated these were facts. He stated they were documented. They may not have reached the strict legal threshold for unlawful coordination beyond a reasonable doubt. They were still evidence of his claims. It was the same strong-sounding response. It was authoritative. It was final. Kennedy waited for him to finish. He played the line again. Senator, I appreciate you citing the report again. You cite it selectively, but you cite it. Let me cite the same report, the same document, page 2 of volume 1. Kennedy read the exact same quote again. He emphasized that the investigation did not establish coordination. He reminded Schiff of the vast resources spent. He listed the lawyers, the subpoenas, the search warrants, the witnesses, He repeated the barber analogy to explain the massive difference between a simple contact and an unlawful conspiracy. He reminded the chamber of the $32 million. He cited the 4 years. He cited the combined forces of federal intelligence. He ended with the exact same unanswerable question. Where is the direct evidence? Where is it, Senator? The chamber remained quiet. It was the crushing quiet of a question demanding an answer that simply did not exist. Kennedy smoothly turned to the 4th tab. He had been speaking continuously for nearly 30 minutes now. His vocal tone had not changed a single time. He maintained the exact same pace. He kept the same pitch. He held the same Louisiana drawl. That unwavering consistency was a form of rhetorical aggression. It meant each new piece of devastating evidence arrived at the exact same clinical temperature as the last. There were no wild theatrics. There was no screaming crescendo. There was just the steady, relentless, unavoidable reading of an official record. The record grew significantly worse with every turned page. Senator, I want to address 2 more specific items. I will try my best to be brief. I know my colleague has a primetime cable news appearance scheduled for this evening. I would not want to keep him from his regular television programming. A ripple of laughter echoed from the Republican side. A few Democrats even smiled despite themselves. Kennedy did not smile at all. The joke was a familiar habit. What immediately followed was not a joke. In 2025, Kennedy continued, federal officials formally declassified sworn testimony from a credible whistleblower. This specific whistleblower was not a Republican political operative. They were not a hostile political appointee. They were not a bitter political enemy. This was a dedicated Democratic staffer. They worked directly on my colleague's Intelligence Committee for more than 10 long years. A career professional, a person who dedicated an entire decade of her life to the very committee my colleague chaired. This person clearly told federal investigators something directly under the strict penalty of perjury. If she lied, she faced severe legal consequences. She stated my colleague explicitly stated the group would leak classified information. This information was derogatory to a political opponent. Those are her exact words to federal investigators. Spoken under oath, Kennedy held up a hand. Senator, I want to be fair here. Fairness matters, even when the facts are uncomfortable. That is currently an allegation. It has not yet been proven in a court of law. It has not been formally adjudicated. My colleague has publicly dismissed it as being politically motivated. In our justice system, people are always presumed innocent until proven guilty. I have spent my legal career defending this system, but the serious allegation was made by a respected member of my colleague's own political party. It was made by a person who worked directly for him inside his own committee room. For more than a decade, a person who had no apparent political motive to fabricate a massive claim. A person who risked her career, her reputation, and her freedom by making it. Making false statements to federal investigators carries severe legal consequences. He tapped the folder. The Special Oversight Committee is currently investigating this matter. We will soon see what they find. The sworn allegation is firmly in the official record. It adds to a disturbing pattern. A clear pattern of saying one specific thing in private under oath. Real legal consequences exist there. Then saying a completely different thing in public on camera. Legal consequences do not exist there. He turned carefully to a separate, final page. This next one is not an unproven allegation, Senator. This specific one is documented on high-definition video. It is permanently placed in the official record of a major congressional proceeding. During publicized committee hearings, my colleague's official staff publicly presented a private text message. It was exchanged between a congressman and a former White House official. The text message was displayed on a massive screen during a nationally televised hearing. It was actively watched by millions of everyday Americans. It was forcefully presented as undeniable evidence. However, the text message was altered. A crucial ellipsis was quietly removed. Specific words were strategically rearranged. The final meaning of the displayed version was different from the actual meaning of the original message. The intentional alteration made the text appear more incriminating than it actually was in reality. Kennedy stared across the room. This was eventually discovered. It was not discovered by my colleague's own office. It was not discovered by an internal ethical review. It was discovered by independent journalists. They acquired the original text. They visually compared it to what was shown on the screen. My colleague's office merely described the massive discrepancy as a simple technical error in transcription. Senator, I have been a practicing lawyer for a considerable portion of my life, not quite as long as my colleague. He went to Harvard Law. I went down to LSU. We occasionally practice a little law between the big football games. I have been a lawyer long enough to clearly know the massive difference between a simple technical error and an intentional alteration. His voice hardened slightly. A technical error is when the office printer accidentally misspells a person's name. A technical error is when a calendar date is accidentally transposed. Intentionally changing the exact words of a private text message is not a technical error. Deliberately removing crucial punctuation is not a technical error. Strategically rearranging sentences is not a technical error. Completely altering the core meaning and then displaying that altered version on a massive screen in a formal congressional hearing as if it were the genuine original is not a technical error. Where I come from, we have a specific name for that kind of behavior. It is the same name that strictly applies to telling the television cameras one thing and the sworn committee another. It is the same name that applies to claiming evidence exists when 53 sworn witnesses say it does not. It is the same name that applies to aggressively blocking vital transcripts for 3 years while repeating claims those transcripts directly contradict. Where is the integrity, Senator? I have been looking for the evidence for 6 long years. I have been looking for the integrity for 6 long years. I have sadly found neither. Kennedy finally closed the 4th tab. He set the heavy folder flat on the wooden podium. He would not need it for what came last. He had been preparing this exact closing argument since the first time he read those declassified transcripts years ago. Years of diligent reading. 6 long years of patient waiting. 6 full years of quietly watching his prominent colleague from California confidently say things on television that 53 sworn witnesses had explicitly contradicted under oath. Let me briefly go over what we have talked about here today, Kennedy said. My colleague boldly told America he possessed undeniable evidence of the biggest political scandal since Watergate. Not just circumstantial evidence, but direct evidence. He said it on Meet the Press. He said it on CNN. He said it on MSNBC. He said it literally hundreds of times over the course of 4 years to a massive audience of millions. Then, 53 witnesses testified under oath before his very own committee. Not a single one provided direct evidence of unlawful coordination. The Director of National Intelligence said no. The Attorney General said no. The Deputy Attorney General said no. My colleague personally read all of their sworn testimony. Then he went straight on television and said yes. He aggressively blocked the public release of those exact transcripts for 3 years, while continuously making the massive claim that the transcripts contradicted. The first special counsel investigated for 2 full years and concluded did not establish. The second oversight council investigated for 4 years and concluded the case should never have been opened. The House of Representatives formally censured my colleague for intentionally misleading the American public. My colleague proudly called it a shiny badge of honor. He loudly said preemptive pardons were the wrong precedent to set. Then he happily accepted one for himself. A Democratic whistleblower, speaking under penalty of perjury, testified that he directly ordered the leaking of classified information. His official staff doctored a private text message in a formal congressional proceeding. They weakly called it a technical error. Kennedy paused. When he finally resumed speaking, his voice was significantly quieter. It was not softer. It was quieter. The crucial difference truly matters. Soft implies weakness. Quiet implies unbreakable control. Now, I like my colleague, Kennedy said quietly. I really do. He is very smart. He is highly articulate. He went to Stanford and to Harvard Law. That is very impressive. I went to LSU. It is also a very fine institution, though we are definitely better known for our football than our lawyers. He has got a handsome face made for television. He has a smooth voice made for podcasts. He has got one specific quality that I have to admire, even though it deeply worries me. He can look directly into a television camera and say things that are unsupported by the evidence. His very own evidence, from his very own committee. He does it with the conviction of a man who believes them. Kennedy shook his head slightly. Where I come from, my sweet mama would have politely called that a unique gift. My daddy was a fiercely honest man. He never intentionally told a lie in his entire life. He would not even dare to exaggerate the size of the fish he caught. If you knew my daddy, you would know that is saying something. My daddy would have called it something much less generous. He looked directly, piercingly at Schiff. Senator, the hard-working American people spent 4 years and $32 million on a massive claim you confidently made. You repeatedly told them you had the evidence. They believed you because you were the powerful chairman, because you had the high-level clearance, because you always looked so sincere on television. When that evidence simply did not exist, when the special counsel clearly said so, when the oversight council clearly said so, when your very own sworn witnesses clearly said so, you did not apologize to the country. You did not correct the public record. You did not simply say, I was wrong. Instead, you proudly called the formal censure a shiny badge of honor. You came right here to the Senate floor. You sat right in that comfortable chair. You said the word evidence again today. Right here on this historic floor, looking straight at me. He set the thick folder resting on the podium open. The numerous tabs were fully visible. The damaging transcripts were entirely exposed. 53 detailed tabs. 53 sworn witnesses. 53 official testimonies. They said exactly what Schiff could never bring himself to publicly admit. I brought the receipts, Senator, Kennedy stated with finality. I have been patiently reading them for 6 long years. In all that long time, and in all those thick transcripts, and all those intense interviews, and all those countless hours of sworn testimony, the only single thing I have actually found is a man who confidently told the biggest fictional story in modern American politics. He could not actually prove a single word of it. He slowly picked up his drugstore glasses. He put them back on his face. He calmly returned to his assigned seat. He did not even bother to look at Schiff as he passed him. He did not need to. The heavy folder was still resting right there on the wooden podium. It was open. It was exposed. It was permanent. Official evidence is permanent once it has been formally entered into the official, historical record of the United States Senate. Schiff did not offer a single response on the floor. He sat frozen in his chair for several long minutes after Kennedy returned to his seat. It was not because Schiff lacked the verbal ability to respond. It was simply because every single available response in his arsenal was merely a slight variation of the same hollow response he had been robotically giving for 6 years. Kennedy had just spent 40 brutal minutes methodically demonstrating something, using official transcripts, exact dates, and the witness's own sworn words. His rehearsed response did not answer the core question. Claiming the report documented mere contacts did not answer, "Where is the direct evidence you said you had?" Claiming I was simply doing my vital job as Intelligence Committee chairman did not answer. Why did you aggressively block the transcripts for 3 years, while telling the cameras the exact opposite of what the witnesses told you under oath? Saying I will wear the formal censure as a shiny badge of honor did not answer anything at all. It was merely an empty political slogan, desperately masquerading as a factual rebuttal. Kennedy had just spent 40 minutes clinically explaining the massive difference between the two. Up in the viewing gallery, Schiff's official press secretary was seated with a smartphone clutched in each hand. She had a defensive statement preloaded and ready to publish. Senator Schiff has always been strictly guided by the factual evidence. He will actively continue to aggressively defend American democracy against those who maliciously seek to undermine it. She silently read the drafted statement on her screen. She read it a second time. The prepared statement contained the specific word evidence. That specific word evidence had just been publicly, methodically, and permanently rendered unusable in any connection with Adam Schiff. She did not tap send on the statement. She quietly locked the phone screen. She slipped the device deep into her pocket. Schiff eventually stood up from his chair. He slowly buttoned his suit jacket. He quietly walked out of the Senate chamber through the rear Democratic cloakroom entrance. This specific, secluded route intentionally avoids the crowded press gallery. He was not seen publicly for the remainder of the legislative day. His office eventually released a brief, written statement at 7:15 that evening. It was more than 4 hours after Kennedy's devastating address. Senator Schiff's long record of public service speaks entirely for itself. The defensive statement was exactly 7 words long. Its sheer, terrified brevity communicated far more than the actual words ever could. The viral video clip that dominated the first 48 hours of the national news cycle was the brutal metaphor. He told America there was a hidden monster in the lake. America diligently drained that massive lake for 4 long years. The lake was empty. The metaphor worked flawlessly because it was simple. It was highly visual. It was irreversible. Once it was heard by the public, it could not be unheard. It reframed 6 agonizing years of intense political conflict, the endless investigations, the dramatic hearings, the massive congressional trials, the screaming cable news segments, the bitter family arguments at Thanksgiving dinners all across America. It distilled everything into one single, undeniable image: a massively drained lake with nothing hidden inside it. The striking image was devastating. Not just because it was a clever turn of phrase, it was factually accurate. The first council had drained the lake. The second council had drained it again. 53 sworn witnesses had testified extensively about exactly what was in that lake. All of them. Every single one of them. Under the strict penalty of perjury, they had ultimately said the exact same thing. It was not what Schiff had confidently told the television cameras. The "where is it?" supercut rapidly became the second most widely shared political clip of the entire week. It featured 11 distinct instances edited tightly in rapid sequence. The vocal escalation in Kennedy's voice was clearly audible. The very first instance was polite. It was almost conversational and casual. The fourth instance carried a distinct tone of genuine bewilderment. The seventh instance carried something that sounded significantly closer to deep pity. The 11th and final instance carried the crushing finality of a guilty verdict. It required no further summary. The relentless question itself was the ultimate summary. 11 times forcefully asked, 0 times answered. The sheer accumulation of the question was the entire unassailable argument. The face-made-for-television line was shared widely by political moderates and independent voters. It was Kennedy's masterful, backhanded compliment delivered right before the final, lethal blow. People immediately recognized it as something that is increasingly rare in modern political discourse. Genuine respect for a bitter opponent is raw communication abilities, delivered immediately before a total, comprehensive dismantlement of their underlying factual credibility. Kennedy had openly called Schiff incredibly smart. He had praised his Ivy League education. He had acknowledged his supreme communication skills. Then, he had expertly delivered the exact thing that made the compliment so lethal. He can look directly into a television camera and say things that are unsupported by the evidence, with the complete conviction of a man who believes them. You simply cannot dismiss a harsh critic who openly praises your talents first. The initial praise acts as the undeniable credential. It makes the subsequent, devastating criticism believable. Senate Democrats did not defend Schiff on the legislative floor that day. Not a single one bravely rose to formally rebut Kennedy's clinical address. Not a single one offered a parliamentary point of order. They did not offer a defensive counterstatement. They did not offer even the brief, formulaic defense that senators typically extend to their political colleagues when they are under severe attack from the opposing party. The silence in the room was comprehensive. In its staggering comprehensiveness, it was devastating. Silence on the Senate floor is officially recorded. It becomes a permanent part of the historical record. The permanent historical record now definitively showed that Adam Schiff's political colleagues sat and quietly heard John Kennedy read their colleague's massive claims directly back to him. They heard him ask, "Where is the evidence?" Exactly 11 times. They collectively chose not to offer a single word of defense on Schiff's behalf. Dick Durbin, the powerful Senate Minority Leader, was directly asked about the devastating address at a crowded press conference the following morning. His careful answer was exactly 11 words long. Every senator is fully entitled to express their views on the floor. He did not say Schiff's name. He did not actively defend the massive foreign coordination claims. He did not attempt to challenge Kennedy's factual reading of the official transcripts. He solely defended the parliamentary procedure, the basic right to speak freely. He did so without defending a single ounce of the underlying substance. The massive, glaring gap between defending the right to speak and defending the substance of the speech was the exact, quiet space. In that space, Schiff's long-standing institutional credibility was being rapidly, permanently revised downward. Progressive media outlets desperately tried to defend the initial investigation itself. They argued that foreign actors interfered in the election. Investigating that initial interference was essential, but they noticeably did not defend Schiff's specific, highly repeated public claim. He claimed he had personally, directly seen undeniable evidence of a secret conspiracy. That specific distinction was critical. Defending the broad investigation was relatively easy and politically correct. Defending Schiff's specific, personal claim was impossible. The special counsel had already made it impossible years ago. Kennedy had just made that impossibility a permanent matter of the official Senate record. A former Democratic Senate Chief of Staff spoke anonymously to Politico on deep background. He articulated what the entire Democratic political apparatus was secretly thinking. The underlying problem was never the broad investigation itself. The investigation was legally legitimate. The massive problem was Schiff constantly going on television. He loudly said he had personally seen direct proof that simply did not exist. He said it far too many times. He said it to far too many cameras. He said it with far too much authority. Kennedy just stood up and read the exact receipts on the floor. He read them right into the permanent record. Those receipts are not going away anytime soon. The Special Oversight Committee suddenly received massive, renewed public attention. They had been actively investigating the classified leak allegation from the Democratic whistleblower. They were also investigating entirely separate real estate financial discrepancies. The federal investigations had been quietly proceeding for several months. They proceeded in the slow, bureaucratic quiet that typically characterizes most federal inquiries. Kennedy's massive address did not magically create brand-new legal evidence for either ongoing investigation. It created intense, unavoidable public awareness. In Washington, public awareness is very often far more legally consequential than the actual evidence itself. Intense public awareness generates massive political pressure. Political pressure is the exact catalyst. It quickly converts dormant, dusty investigative files into highly active, dangerous legal proceedings. The Senate Intelligence Committee suddenly experienced a highly specific, uncomfortable internal tension. Both Kennedy and Schiff actively served on it. This tension always occurs when one prominent member publicly, brutally challenges another's core credibility, using the committee's very own internal records. Schiff's long-standing authority on intelligence matters carried a massive, permanent asterisk. This was the core credential that had proudly defined his entire career. It firmly established him as his party's leading voice on national security. It successfully propelled him from the House directly to the Senate. That heavy asterisk was constructed entirely of sworn transcripts. Official transcripts do not fade away with the rapid news cycle. They sit permanently in dark vaults. They sit in digital databases. They sit in official government archives. They loudly say the exact same unchangeable thing every single time someone decides to read them. Schiff's meticulously crafted political brand was not instantly destroyed. He was the brave man who valiantly defended democracy against foreign interference. Massive political brands are built over 2 long decades on hundreds of primetime television appearances and 2 highly publicized congressional trials. They do not instantly collapse from a single 40-minute Senate floor speech. But the brand had been deeply, permanently, and fatally qualified. Before Kennedy's clinical address, the powerful, unqualified version existed. Adam Schiff fiercely defended democracy. After the devastating address, the qualified version became inescapable. Adam Schiff fiercely defended democracy using evidence he repeatedly, loudly claimed to have seen. 53 sworn witnesses under oath could not confirm it. 2 separate special counsels could not establish it. He aggressively blocked it from public view for 3 years, while continuing to confidently make those massive claims on national television. The severe qualification was not remotely partisan. It was brutally factual. The first special counsel was a Republican. He was appointed by a Republican administration. The second counsel was appointed by the subsequent administration. The contradictory transcripts were produced directly by Schiff's very own committee. The sworn witnesses heavily included high-level officials from the previous Democratic administration. The overwhelming evidence against Schiff's massive claims came from every possible political direction. John Kennedy had simply, calmly organized it. He meticulously cited it with exact dates and page numbers. He asked the one brutal question that the mountain of evidence furiously demanded: where is it? Out on the lucrative political speaking circuit, a massive shift became apparent within a matter of weeks. Event organizers rapidly reported that the standard audience questions had reversed in their order. Schiff's eager audiences used to consistently open with frantic questions about his political rivals and the broad state of democracy. Now, they aggressively opened with highly specific questions about the locked transcripts and the missing evidence. The undeniable receipts had permanently changed the entire conversation. Public conversations, once fundamentally changed by hard facts, do not ever change back. In a quiet Senate office located deep in the Hart Building, late on a dark Tuesday evening, Adam Schiff sat alone at his large desk. The expansive office was quiet. The loyal staffers were long gone. The marble hallway was empty. The low, steady hum of the massive building's ventilation system was the only audible sound. Resting directly on the desk, there was a simple folder. It sat right next to an open laptop and a thick stack of classified briefing materials prepared for the next morning's Intelligence Committee session. It was not Kennedy's specific folder. That iconic folder was still resting right on the Senate podium. It was left wide open, exactly where Kennedy had permanently left it. Someone else had eventually collected a copy of the materials, perhaps a young Senate page, or a late-night custodial worker, or a nameless political aide whose identity would never be officially recorded. They quietly returned it to Schiff's private office. It arrived silently in a standard interdepartmental envelope. It was devoid of any attached note. Schiff slowly reached out and opened the folder. He quietly read the very first tab. It was Clapper's sworn testimony. He read exactly what Clapper had clearly said, under the strict penalty of perjury, no direct empirical evidence. He read the exact date of that specific testimony. Then, he slowly read the exact date of his very next primetime CNN television appearance. It occurred exactly 3 days later. He had confidently, loudly stated the evidence was far more than circumstantial. The two conflicting dates sat right next to each other on the printed timeline, exactly 3 days apart. One spoken under the severe penalty of perjury. One spoken directly to the television cameras. The exact same man had full access to both completely different realities. The exact same man had deliberately, intentionally chosen which specific one to share with the trusting American public. He slowly closed the folder. He did not open it again. Over on the darkened Senate floor, the wooden podium where John Kennedy had calmly stood was empty. The microphone was switched off. The massive legislative chamber was dark, but the official record now permanently contained 53 exact citations. The permanent, highly searchable, uncorrectable historical record of the United States Senate contained 11 unanswered questions. It contained one devastating metaphor about a massive lake that had been drained and found empty. Where I come from, receipts do not ever expire. In a political ecosystem where manufactured narratives so frequently outrun the factual truth, what ultimately happens to a nation? What happens when the very people we implicitly trust to bravely protect our vital institutions are the exact same ones quietly, methodically dismantling them from the inside?